All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the County of Santa Clara's Federal Affairs Advocacy Task Force, and the first time of business, of course, is to call the meeting to order and have the clerk call the roll to establish the presence of a quorum.
Good morning, Supervisor Cortese. Here. And Supervisor Simidian.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Both members of the committee being present. Thank you for that. First item of business is public comment. That portion of our agenda is set aside for members of the public who wish to speak to the committee on matters not on our agenda but properly within the jurisdiction. We have just one card today, and that's for Mr. Largent. Mr. Largent, if you'd come on up, please. And as you know, we have up to 3 minutes set aside for public comment per speaker. Thank you.
Ready when you are, David. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent. I was on a telephone call with Damon Silver from the Public Defender's Office. I've had a lot of conversations with Damon over the years. That was my first line of defense. That was the office I went into to just beg for some type of legal representation and help. So on my case, Joe, that was for that arrest out in front of the Family Justice Center, for that unconstitutional order that I keep pretty much putting in your face, they are still handing this out, Joe. They're giving out the order that's unrevised, and they continue to violate people's civil rights. Now, I know you probably just don't care because nothing really got done over this, and it's not really your district out here, but this order is on the Palo Alto courthouse too, Joe, right in your backyard over there, and they're still handing it out there. So your constituents, they can't protest that courthouse out there if they wanted to. And that's right in your district, Joe. So I know you're really not going to do anything about this. You're not going to get out there and start trying to light a fire under James Williams. You're really not going to try to protect my rights. And you're just going to allow me to get slaughtered. And Joe, that's what's happening. I would like to know why you even wanted to chime in. Why did you even want James Williams to review a document that you were going to do nothing about? Because what I'm coming up with is a lot of stuff that's coming out of you is just not adding up. Your surveillance policies that you got going, they're smoke and mirrors. None of that stuff, they don't even follow any of that stuff. You know, the DA's office for all this stuff that you were bringing up, they don't care about it. They leave it up to a judge to decide. They're not following your rules, Joe. So what's the point of having all these surveillance ordinances? Nobody cares. Same thing like this. You should have put a stop to this. Okay? You should have. Because you know who's losing out right now, Joe? Is my daughter right here. She's 4.5. I get to see her an hour a week right now, Joe. I didn't get to see her for 2 years, and I was protesting that family court to have orders enforced. And the harassment that I have dealt with has come to my front door. They've done welfare checks on my grandmother. They've come to my new place. They're just messing with me. It's all retaliation. Light a fire underneath my legal defense. Get my rights protected. And stop this crap from happening in our community. You're supposed to be a healing administrator. You're supposed to listen to people that come in here. Because you know what right now? She's 4.5. And she has her little megaphone. And she'll be protesting everywhere you go in all your different events. I've been handing this thing out in downtown Palo Alto, Joe, with pictures of my child, to let the community know about your failed leadership.
Let me just confirm with the clerk that there are no other cards for folks who'd like to speak under public comment. There are not. Thank you. That takes us to item number 3, which is to approve the consent calendar. Before we go there, however, I do want to acknowledge the presence of a representative from Congressman Ro Khanna's office, Tom Pike, who's here with us. Thank you again for being with us. We appreciate your presence at these meetings and appreciate the opportunity to be in touch with the Congressman as well. All right, item number 3 is to approve the consent calendar. Supervisor Cortese.
I'm happy to move the 2 items on consent.
Thank you very much. Without objection and hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. That takes us then to our regular agenda, item number 4, which is to receive verbal reports from the chairperson and the vice chairperson relating to items of interest to the task force. Supervisor Cortese, anything you'd like to share this morning?
No, nothing in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing, Supervisor Cortese and members of staff and for Ms. Christian's team in particular, and I assume we've got folks on the line as well. I was certainly intrigued to see here within the last 48 hours that our two members of Congress, Congresswoman Lofgren and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, have introduced privacy legislation that is drawing some attention. Clearly, the issue is an important one to folks here in our county. So I do want to just highlight it at the very beginning of the meeting and indicate a desire to sort of follow up, learn more as expeditiously as we can, and consider the implications for the county as a body, if any, and I'm sure there will be some, but more likely for the 2 million folks who are residents of the county. Significant issue, and I'm not sure anybody would be surprised that I'm raising that issue for consideration. That being said, why don't we go to the CEO for a verbal report and then to County Council for a verbal report. Dr. Smith, anything today under a verbal report?
Daniel Christian will give us a verbal report.
Okay.
Thank you. Actually, I do not have a verbal report. Prime Policy Group is going to provide an update on the federal budget and appropriations process, and then Bert Margolin will be joining in a little bit later on the health policy and budget landscape.
Great. The never-ending issues. All right. Then we'll go to County Council. Any developments since our last meeting on which would make sense to report at this time?
Sorry, having some mic troubles over here. Just a couple of updates, one of which is what I would put in the category of breaking news. In the litigation around the country challenging the federal administration's denial of care rule, which is an issue on which the county has filed its own lawsuit, there was a recent order coming out of the federal court in New York. That case is a bit farther along than ours, and the judge there recently issued an order vacating the rule in its entirety. Because most of us up here are lawyers and you may be interested in some of the legal procedural details.
And before you start down those legal procedural details, just remind everyone what denial of care is or is about.
Right. It expanded employees' ability to use their own religious views or other personal views to deny access to care for a significant number of members of the community. The legal procedural rules, I'll be brief on them. Because this was an order in an administrative procedure challenge issued on a motion for summary judgment, it completely wipes out enforcement of the rule, vacates it for the entire country. There aren't some of the trickier questions about nationwide preliminary injunctions that we've seen in some of the other federal cases. So it just wipes out enforcement of an administrative rule. The rule no longer exists, and a court in New York is able to do that for the entire country. The effective date of the rule, absent that order, would have been November 22nd, so it was just in time. The other key update is in the public charge litigation relating to denial of immigration benefits for persons who may be deemed a public charge due to use of public benefits. The oral argument in the county's litigation was held on October 2nd. Actually, I think the last meeting we had here, I reported that it was ongoing right at that moment. The county already obtained a preliminary injunction last week as to enforcement of that rule in California. Other courts have issued nationwide injunctions there, but the law in the Ninth Circuit currently is not great on the ability of a single court to issue a nationwide injunction. The Department of Justice has appealed the injunction and moved to stay the injunction in the district court, and that litigation is ongoing. Those are my only two updates.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on that, Supervisor? Not today. Okay, thank you. Then that will take us to the item number 7, which is the Prime Policy, our advocacy group in Washington, D.C., and their report on the federal budget and appropriations process and where things stand. And so let me say good morning at our end of the line and welcome. Who do we have with us today from Prime?
We've got Rich B., Aaron Jordan, and Martin Tayon from Prime Policy Group on the line.
Thanks so much. Who'd like to begin, and what do you think would be helpful to share with us this morning?
Thank you, Supervisor. This is Rich B., and I'll begin our presentation, and then I'll turn things over to Aaron Griffey. I'm going to just provide a broad overview of where things stand in the appropriations process and the general atmosphere in Congress, and then my partner Aaron will provide an accounting of how the county priorities have fared thus far in the appropriations process. Since our last meeting, there's been some progress made on the appropriations front. The Senate was able to pass by a vote of 84 to 9, which is a good sign, and appropriations, what we call a minibus, a group of appropriations bills. The minibus that passed the Senate included the Commerce, Justice, Science bill, the Interior bill, the Agricultural bill, and the Transportation HUD bill. The House passed a similar package this summer, only that the House passed a version of this minibus that also contained military construction VA bill. The Senate wasn't able to include that bill because of some controversy surrounding some of the military construction accounts, because those three accounts, the President, the administration has been, quote unquote, raising to fund the border wall. And so he's been repurposing those military construction accounts for the construction of the wall. This is all against the backdrop of we're approaching the expiration of the current continuing resolution on November 21st. We're hearing that leadership on a bipartisan, bicameral basis wants the next continuation or CR to run until sometime towards the end of December. There was some talk earlier about having a CR go into February, just trying to get around the whole impeachment process, but I think the current thinking is having the next CR go that long would probably set up a year-long continuing resolution, and I think that on both sides of the aisle, there's interest in trying to pass as many standalone appropriations bills as possible. The healthcare extenders that came along with the last continuing resolution are expected to be continued in the next continuing resolution. So for the county's priorities, Medicaid disproportionate share hospital or DISH program will be extended, as will the temporary assistance for needy families or candidate program. Those are both likely to ride along with the next continuing resolution. And I think in terms of an overall outlook, I think we're going to see some more progress on these appropriations bills with a number of them, but probably not all completed by the end of the year. And then Congress will likely have to do a continuing resolution for some of the more controversial bills like the Department of Homeland Security and the military construction bill to keep those funding into the next year. And it's quite possible that those bills may have to be funded on a year-long continuing resolution at the end of the day. Let me turn to initiatives sort of overarching all of this with appropriations and then the whole impeachment process. And just briefly, what we're hearing is that the Democrats in the House are taking a lot longer than they hoped to try and put together the articles of impeachment against the president. There is hope at one point to have those put together and voted on the House by year end, and it looks like that may be slipping until the end of January. Also, too, the Senate is expecting to prepare for a longer than expected trial. Senator McConnell, who's the majority leader in the Senate, has cautioned his members that the trial could last between 6 and 8 weeks, with the Senate in session Monday through Saturday in order to go through that full trial. So this whole impeachment, while I would argue that it's not yet impeded other legislative priorities, it could at some point slow down other legislative matters in the Congress. And so far, we're continuing to see this be a very partisan issue. You know, it's possible at some point in time this could become a more bipartisan process, but it's not yet emerged, and it's not clear whether it will emerge as a bipartisan process. So let me turn things over to Aaron to report on some of the county's priorities.
Good morning. With respect to some of the programs and funding streams we track for the county, we don't have any major updates on numbers coming out of the appropriations process. The minibus that the Senate passed last week contained the same program numbers we reported last month that had passed out of the committee, with one exception. I have reported that the committee proposed cap for the crime victim fund for FY 2020 was $3.8 billion, which is roughly the same as the current 2019 cap. What passed the Senate, however, was a cap of $3.177 billion. So obviously, all these numbers that were reported last month and that one as well will still need to be conferenced with the House at some point, but per my colleague just mentioned before. So I'll give you a few updates on a few of the county's priorities. Not too much has changed since last month in any of these. The Title IV waiver issue is still ongoing. As it turns out, the Family First Transition Act, which I mentioned before in some detail, is a bipartisan, bicameral bill, which should now be introduced this week in the House during a pro forma session. I had hoped it would be introduced prior to this meeting so I could report on the sponsors and co-sponsors. So I will keep the county informed with any updates as I get them. I checked right before this call and it has not yet been introduced. Violence against women reauthorization. As has been reported several times now, violence against women reauthorization violence against women has not yet been reauthorized. You'll recall that Senator Feinstein had been working with Senator Ernst to draft legislation in the Senate. However, after months of negotiations this week, potentially, as we're on this call, Senator Feinstein plans to introduce the version, save for a few technical edits, of the reauthorization bill that passed the House last spring. This version includes provisions on gun safety, tribal issues, and LGBTQ issues that Senator Feinstein would not leave on the table in her negotiations with the Republicans. This bill will be an uphill battle in the Senate, so her office is encouraging letters of support for the bill, and I will share it with the county when it is introduced this week. One minor note for planning purposes on TANF reauthorization. As was previously reported, TANF was reauthorized to continue until November 21st under the CR. It is worth noting, however, that TANF law states that grants are made quarterly, so the authority was provided to obligate states their first quarter 2020 grant. And then lastly, I want to just give a quick update on two staff roles coming out of the Department of Agriculture. First, on the revision of categorical eligibility to be based on receipt of TANF benefits, this comment period, which was previously extended, ended November 1st, last Friday. So I'm told by the Hill that they are assuming it could be finalized anytime after December 15th. Secondly, on standardizing methods for calculating utility allowances, the comment period ends December 2nd as of now, although that is possible to be extended as well. Either way, we anticipate a few weeks post-comment period for the agency to finalize, give or take. So that's all I have for today. I don't know if there's any questions, or I'm happy to report or send follow-up.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on your team, or should we weigh in with questions at this point if we've got them?
I think that would be fine to do with questions.
Good. Let me turn to Supervisor Cortese for a first round, if any, and if you want to.
In terms of the impeachment process, the little segment we heard about that process eventually impeding legislation, I'm just wondering if we can have them go over the sort of the prospective timeline on that. You know, how does that work? I don't know if it went over my head or if it was just sort of a quick synopsis and I didn't really get it.
Thank you, Supervisor Cortese. I think you could hear that, Prime. If we could talk a little bit more, and let me just ask that you start by essentially recapping what you said just a few minutes ago so that we get a sort of a second opportunity to let that sink in. At least that would be helpful for me. And then it sounded like from what you said that there were, well, this is the current thinking, but it's possible this would happen or it's possible that would happen, understanding that that's a bit of a game theoretical model with lots of decision points. If you could sort of walk us through at least the basics there, I think that would be helpful in laying out some possible scenarios.
Sure. This is Rich Mead, and I'll start and I'll allow my colleagues to jump in as needed. So let me just state what I reported, and then we can answer and address the questions you raised. So the impeachment process, which began last month, has been an ongoing process in the House. And thus far, the impeachment process has not impeded work by other committees or work on the House floor. The impeachment process is turning to a more public process next week with the first public hearings on this. And it's quite possible that as things heat up on the impeachment front, it may potentially could impede actions in committees or on the House floor. I'm going to pause and let my colleague Marty talk about the disruption that a Senate trial will cause in terms of legislative process. But like I said, thus far, it's been sort of business as usual on other legislative fronts without any pause or hesitation. But it's possible that things could be overwhelmed by the impeachment process as it heats up on the House. And then let me turn to Marty to describe the Senate trial process, how that could impede or does impede the legislative process.
Sure. Before I get into the Senate, the House situation is Leader Hoyer has warned their people to expect to be in until December 20th. The assumption is that they're hoping to act by then on this impeachment on the floor of the House. But I could foresee a problem with if that's true, that's about the time when the next CR is going to expire, and that could make negotiating that very interesting. So we'll have to keep an eye on those two issues in the House. If they do act, if the House does act by the end of the year and send something to the Senate, Senator Leader McConnell has indicated, I think as Rich mentioned, that you could take up to 6 weeks or more on it. My guess is that would fill up their January, and they probably have a goal of finishing it up by the February recess, which is usually the week of President's Day. The Senate takes a week at that time. But they can do a two-track system in the sense that each day, starting circa, say, 1 o'clock as a trial setting of the Senate, and you could come in at 9 a.m. and do legislation until 12:30 or so. So if they can work things out, legislation will be done on days where prior to meeting in trial, or some days where depositions are taken, they don't meet in trial at all, and then they would have full days to work on legislation. Because usually, at least that's how it went the last time, they wait a number of days coming in later in the day, and then they would take 2 or 3 days off while they deposed witnesses and film those depositions as they decided later whether to bring them in and have them on the floor. So there are a number of ways where they can continue to do legislation during that time frame.
And I would chime in that this is Elizabeth Hart-Thompson, that I checked in and spoke with a few counterpart colleagues in leadership actually this morning who mentioned that the Speaker would still like to move the prescription drug bill off the House floor as well as USMCA bill in December. So those are two very weighty pieces of legislation.
Got it. Supervisor Cortese, does that provide a little bit more clarity?
Yeah, and I'm sure I can, probably just look at a visual projection online or something like that. I got a little confused about the potential for 6 months versus the January, February time frame, and I think that's because you're talking about two different pieces of the process, but I couldn't catch that. Part of it is, I think, just my ability to hear well over the speaker
our
system.
speaker system is imperfect here, so please bear with us on that. But I think picking up on the strand that Supervisor Cortese just referenced, let's paint I'm going to call it a worst case scenario in the sense of how much time this takes. If somebody said, well, could it drag on for an unexpectedly long period of time, what might that look like if you were sort of being pessimistic about the ability to move expeditiously and or multitask?
I think this is Rich B, and I'll start and let others chime in. sort of worst case scenario is House vote on articles of impeachment does not occur until end of January, early February, and then the Senate trial. And again, forgive us if one of us misspoke. We were talking about weeks, not months. But hey, worst case scenario, so if you have the articles of impeachment land in the Senate end of January, early February, and then the sort of an 8-week trial in the Senate would put it to probably Easter, roughly. So that would potentially be sort of in the way from until middle of April.
Got it.
The other factor, it could be a political factor in the sense that if Trump and McConnell think that this is, to their benefit, keeping this in the press and enraging their base, they may be in a hurry to move it along. But I think right now, the thought is that Trump and McConnell will want to show deference to it, obviously do it and not be accused of short-circuiting it, but to get it done in a reasonable amount of time and move on.
Thank you.
He's got 21.
I think that follow-up is clarifying. Thank you very much. I mentioned at the start of the meeting an interest in the privacy legislation. As long as we have you on the line, any initial reaction that you're hearing in your circles back in the Capitol? Or too soon?
This is Rich Mead again. I'll say that this area of privacy has a lot of interest right now on a bipartisan basis. And so it's really interesting to see sort of both sides sort of coming together, trying to figure out what to do. We've not really had a chance to review the two bills introduced this week, but we do know that the Senate Commerce Committee has been trying to work on a bipartisan bill to report out of that committee too. So there's a lot on the table in the privacy space, and it's not yet clear which path this will go in terms of resolution.
All right. Well, to be continued, let me just offer a concern up today to sort of lay down a marker on this issue just as one individual supervisor. Clearly, our board has not taken up the matter at all. But historically, as you all know, the affected industries, if legislation is going to move, then ask for federal preemption. And I understand the argument for federal preemption, and I have heard over the years, now decades, the arguments against a, quote, patchwork quilt of state regulation. But the concern that I have that I want to express to our advocates, just to sort of keep top of mind, is that federal preemption for what ultimately gets gutted and turned into a weak piece of legislation then, of course, precludes meaningful regulation by our larger states, California in particular, on important issues. So if you could sort of keep the issue of preemption top of mind. My understanding is that the legislation does not currently have preemption provisions in it. I'm guessing that that will be part of the conversation going forward. And, it's one thing to seek preemption. It's another thing to seek preemption if you've got a federal legislation that doesn't really get the job done and that precludes the states from getting the job done. Forgive my obvious bias towards meaningful state regulation, but there it is. All right. It sounds as if, and for the folks at Prime, don't let me put words in your mouth, but when we were in this new administration, we were getting sort of a series of proposals, rat-a-tat-tat, that it sounds to me like we're in this sort of the long slog of sort of trying to keep track of what's happening and make sure that we do our job in terms of weighing in on a day-to-day basis. But your sort of take on the difference between where we are today and where we were, say, 2.5 years ago?
This is Rich Mead again, and I'll start and let others chime in. I think your assessment of the earlier days of the Trump administration seems as though there was sort of a lot on the slowed down quite a bit. In fact, we were remarking that in general, a lot of what they're, in terms of what's in the pipeline, if you will, in terms of new regulation, has really been slowed down, and there's some speculation about why. There's a thought that there's a bottleneck at the Office of Management budget, but nevertheless, sort of the flow of sort of regulatory actions from this administration certainly has slowed down.
I think part of that is that the ones they put out, they've had a number of them get held up in courts. And they realize, and they've got now there are folks in these agencies that are saying, I read the story this morning where these environmental laws or regs they're trying to put out, they realize that they can't come up with something that will stand a court case. And so they're kind of frozen.
Got it. All right, then. Thank you. Without objection, we will deem the report for item number 7 received. Thank our folks at Prime, and I know Mr. Margolin was trying to manage some scheduling challenges. Mr. Margolin, were you able to join us, or are we still?
I am here.
Thank you. I was hoping that beep a few moments ago was you. So where do things stand on the federal health policy and budget landscape? And we will circle back to our friends at Prime here in a minute to see if they have any other insights they want to offer on the health arena. So what should we know?
So thank you very much. I'm sure the folks at Prime probably referenced, I joined after their report started, but I'm assuming they talked about the cloud that the impeachment process has created over the entire process, all the uncertainty that it's generated. As far as health programs and where they stand, the programs we care about, the deferral of dish cuts, funding for F2HCs, all tied up in a budget deal, which is also now linked to a CR that we thought would be extended into early next year. Now looks, I'm sure Prime reported, as if it will be extended only until December, unless something has changed in the last few minutes. That was the thinking as of yesterday. President wants a shorter CR, and again, F2HC funding, the dish issue, they're all tied up in this budget deal. The health issue that had the most promise of bipartisan agreement is also probably going to be deferred because of the impeachment cloud, and that's the drug pricing issue. Speaker Pelosi has a proposal that has moved out of 3 committees in the House, is awaiting floor action. The floor action may still occur in the passed bill, and again, the Pelosi bill gives the federal government, Health and Human Services, the authority to negotiate directly with the drug companies on the price of drugs. They have the issue she's been negotiating with her own progressive caucus over has been how much authority to give HHS. And right now she has a bill or a proposal that would involve a minimum of 35 drugs per year. The progressive caucus wants all drugs subject to negotiation. So there's an internal Democratic debate, but again, the debate yet to be had and the negotiation still in the future is with the Senate, where they don't want to do right now direct negotiations. Grassley and Wyden have an agreement on a bill which puts restrictions on out-of-pocket costs under Medicare. It puts a cap on the inflation factor year over year for drugs, but doesn't authorize direct federal negotiation. So there's a lot of negotiating to be done. If there wasn't this larger issue between the President and Congress over impeachment, maybe something would have been begun the negotiation might have been begun this year, but now it's likely to be deferred to next year. Surprise billing was the other issue we thought a few months ago would be subject to bipartisan agreement, and that actually has been stalled in large part through intense provider resistance to the formula being advanced, unlikely to have much happen there. So the issue that actually is the most dramatic development for the county that has a federal dimension to it is really Medicaid waiver strategy and what the state now has told us they're going to do formally vis-a-vis Medicaid waivers that are expiring this year. They released, as you know, a report last week that confirm what we have thought for some time, and that is that the next Medicaid waiver would be a much smaller waiver due to budget neutrality restrictions, and they in fact confirmed that's what they plan to do, put forward a much, much smaller waiver. And then for all of the funding, the billions of dollars that public hospital systems like Santa Clara have accessed in the past through waiver, what they've said essentially in this report is they're going to use managed care payments to make up that difference. That's their plan. And they put out this work about managed care payments and how that would be structured into a much larger state plan to reform the Medi-Cal system, which they are calling Cal-E. So in one of the key things that's clear when you review this 180-page document is the waiver, which is every prior waiver negotiation was always the dominant state-federal negotiation, the big state issue in healthcare. It's really a secondary issue to what they plan to accomplish in Cal-A. They're using the waiver to fund the global payment program, which uses SNICH dollars to fund care for the uninsured. So there is a value to the waiver, but most of what they want to do is going to be done through managed care plans. And it isn't just public hospital services. They plan to do a major restructuring of the entire Medi-Cal program directed at elevating the role that managed care plans play. And they plan to address things like whole person care and other services that go to the social service needs of people in the Medi-Cal system through managed care, not through waiver funding. So CalAIM is out there now. We now have a waiver strategy. There's one aspect of CalAIM that I know the county has a particular interest in, and that's the full integration plan, the idea of testing in 2024, whether physical, behavioral, and oral health can be delivered to a single entity. That's one of the many, many aspects of CalAIM that we'll be tracking, paying attention to. It's a very ambitious plan. I would say it's the most complex, far-reaching Medi-Cal reform ever advanced by the state of California. And they've got a stakeholder process they've set up in Sacramento, and it will engage all of us involved in healthcare over the next several months and really in the years to come in trying to help the state figure out how to reform the Medi-Cal system. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me ask a little bit about the status of, and this will involve pulling the county counsel's office in as well, the status of and implications of the pending suit, Texas v. United States. This is the Affordable Care Act litigation that you've spoken with us about before, Mr. Margolin. The report that we have from county council indicates that the oral arguments were heard in the Fifth Circuit earlier this year in July. And I guess the question, Mr. Margolin, is, what are the possibilities if and when we get a decision there, for our world to get turned upside down pretty darn quickly?
So we're still waiting for the appellate decision. People say it could come out any day, and that's been said now for many weeks. So we're still waiting. Hasn't been released yet. Based upon the way the oral arguments went, there's been a conventional wisdom, but again, these things can be wrong, that the lower court decision is likely to be affirmed, in which case, which is a decision to repeal the entire ACA, in effect, which would mean this issue would go to the Supreme Court and be before the court in 2020, likely in the middle of the presidential election cycle. Again, dealing with conventional wisdom on the part of legal scholars who study the issue, including some very conservative legal scholars, there's a presumption that the Supreme Court, and again, Justice Roberts is the key vote here, will likely not overturn the ACA based on the arguments that have been advanced in this Texas case. But what will happen is, if there is an affirmation of the lower court decision and it is appealed, you'll have this pending case that will overturn the ACA. So even though most of us think it's not going to succeed ultimately,
And let me just turn to County Council. Implicit in your statement, I think, Mr. Margolin, was that if the Fifth Circuit affirmed the lower court, that the decision would nonetheless be stayed pending appeal. Did I grasp that correctly?
Yes, that's the assumption, given what a dramatic change it would be in the structure of healthcare and the chaos that would ensue if there wasn't a stay. That's the
All right.
assumption.
Let me turn to County Council. That's your expectation as well, yes?
Yes, and I would just add that as these kinds of matters wend their way through the federal courts, in addition to waiting months and months sometimes for a federal court of appeals to rule, there would then be the possibility of en banc review, meaning by the full Fifth Circuit before it goes up to the Supreme Court. So it may be many months.
But during those many months, our expectation is anxiety, not turning the apple cart upside down.
And the district court's order is currently stayed, so I agree with
Right.
that assessment.
All right, thank you. Anything on the healthcare front that Prime would like to add or offer? And then I want to turn to Supervisor Cortese, see if he's got any additional questions or comments on the healthcare side. Prime?
We don't have anything to add to that.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Cortese, anything else?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Let me then go back to Mr. Margolin and also to the folks at Prime and also to our own team here, Ms. Christian, Dr. Smith. Is there anything we should be doing, not doing, thinking deeply about by virtue of this pending case, understanding the timeline that we've got? I mean, Dr. Smith will recall at the Health and Hospitals Committee meeting in the immediate aftermath of the presidential election when folks thought the ACA was about to be turned upside down. I somewhat flippantly said, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and that's sort of been the approach we've taken, and we've been fortunate that we've been able to move forward with the implementation and get more people covered. At least I believe we've been fortunate in that regard. But I'm now that we're where we are, I do think it's time that we should be thinking about, all right, so what, if anything, should we be thinking or doing? I see Dr. Smith leaning in, so why don't I let the folks at Prime and Mr. Margolin pause for a moment. Dr. Smith, your thoughts?
Yes. Well, at this point, I don't think there's anything we really can or should do. We basically have to await the decision in the court and the process, which will take some ongoing time period. I think the key issue for us is to continue to proceed with our comments, participation in the California waiver process. As Bert mentioned, that's probably the most productive thing that we can do to make sure that the county is positioned correctly in that process. I think we also will be exploring with the state directly the possibility of a county demonstration project related to some of the whole person care efforts that we have taken on. But with regard to the court case, I don't think we really can do anything until we have a decision at that point.
All right. Mr. Margolin, any other thoughts on our readiness status, if for lack of a better phrase?
I agree with Dr. Smith's assessment that the real action is going to be in this Cal proposal and the waiver and the managed care discussion, and this other issue is deferred long enough and it's murky enough, and it will involve the entire healthcare delivery system of the nation, that even if the worst were to happen, it probably gets, there'll be a period of months to engage. It will be engaged as part of the larger delivery system nationally, and I don't see productive time spent on that in the next several months. Again, it's the state, as Dr. Smith said, it's state reforms where the opportunity and the risk lies.
Thank you. Prime, anything else to close this conversation out?
Well, I think we agree fully with that analysis and recommendation.
All right, thank you. Then Supervisor Cortese, anything else on item number 8 regarding health policy and budget landscape?
Nothing further from me.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Then we go to item number 9, which is to receive the verbal report from the Office of the County Executive regarding the regulatory and legislative status of SNAP, which I think we've already covered in the earlier comments. Yes, Ms. Christian? Anything else there?
Yes, I would just share that the regulatory actions that the administration is taking are to implement cuts that had been contemplated by the House Majority Party at the time back in 2018 when the Farm Bill was reauthorized. Those cuts were ultimately rejected in the Farm Bill, but the administration is going down a path to try to implement them by issuing proposed rules. We've provided comments on the categorical eligibility rule, where there had been some concerns that that proposed rule could have some effect on free and reduced lunch programs. So the Department of Agriculture revised its rule and extended the length of time to provide comments, and we provided supplemental comments on that as well. And I'm in conversations with Social Services and County Council about providing comment on the utility rule, which would change how people receiving food stamps have a disregard for the cost of heating and cooling. So, and I'm also having conversations with Social Services about what all these changes could potentially mean to our actual county clients and what types of changes would we contemplate, or how would we respond if people are losing their food stamp benefits. And as I have more information, I'll be happy to share that with the offices and work with Social Services to keep the board informed.
Thank you. I think the only request I would make, Supervisor Cortese, is that in a moment we're going to adjourn to our next regular meeting on Wednesday, December the 4th. If there's information that you think would be timely and helpful to the 5 board offices, please don't wait until December the 4th. Just share it off agenda as you often do. Supervisor Cortese, anything else on this item?
No, thank you very much.
All right. Anything else from Prime on this item? You referenced it earlier, so I think we've been there. But if there's anything else you want to add, certainly this would be the time.
No, I think Christian covered it.
All right. Thank you. Then I believe that that covers all items on today's agenda. We covered items 10 and 11 on consent earlier, so item number 12 is in fact to adjourn to our December 4th meeting, and we would look forward to being with you either here in the chambers or telephonically at that time. Thank you. Without objection, we are adjourned.